The planet below was a wound in space scarlet storms, tearing across continents, oceans boiling under lightning skies. No sane species would call this home, yet the sensors were clear. There were structures down there, cities. Zilara stared. At the display, her pupils tightening like blades. She stood in the forward observation deck of the diplomatic cruiser Varithos, a ship so elegant it seemed immune to the chaos beyond its viewports. The planet filled the glass with its fury. Ash-red clouds churned in cyclonic madness. Rivers of molten rock split mountain ranges like open veins, and sheets of lightning stitched the sky in jagged arcs of white fire. Her hands rested on them. Console as the reading scrolled, each line more incomprehensible than the last. Gravity, 1.2 standard. Temperature flux, 80 degrees in one rotation. Tectonic activity, constant, violent. Atmosphere, breathable barely, but thick with toxins and biohazards. She flicked her crest in silent disbelief. Class 13, she whispered. By the core, that's beyond catastrophic. The protocols burned through her memory. Class 13, Deathworld uninhabitable. Contact forbiddance. Evacuate survey parties immediately. No species had ever been recorded surviving long-term on such a planet. Even automated drones sent to similar worlds seldom returned intact. Yet here she was, watching something impossible. Cities glimmered faintly through the storms, grids of light flickering like stubborn stars. And life signs, millions of them, clustered across every continent. Zilara's throat tightened as she keyed the comm. Confirm these readings, she ordered. Tell me this is an error. Her adjutant, a tall, pale Threxian, flicked his mandibles nervously. Triple confirmed, Judge. Sensor sweeps verify complex urban infrastructure and biological signatures matching baseline carbon. He hesitated, mandibles clicking softly. They're humanoid. Zilara turned sharply, disbelief etched across her features. Humanoid on this? She gestured toward the viewport, where a hurricane the size of a continent raged, its eye glowing like a molten pupil. That world should sterilize flesh in minutes. The Threxian said nothing. There was nothing to say. Her crest flattened against her skull as the implications clawed at her mind. If a species could endure this, what else could they endure? The Council's directive had been simple. Classify the planet, record its threat. Rating and withdraw. Observation only, no interference. But those orders had been given under the assumption this place was dead. It wasn't. It was alive, and something was thriving in its jaws. Zilara keyed a private log, her voice calm though her pulse beat like war drums. Initial verdict. Class 13 confirmed. World exhibits constant hyperseismic activity, violent atmospheric instability, apex predators in abundance. Unknown species present in significant numbers. Displays advanced technology. Will continue silent observation until further review. She paused, fingers curling against the console. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass adjudge of the Galactic Concord, sworn to bring order to chaos. But as she gazed at the red-streaked world below, she felt no order, only unease. Whatever lives here, her voice was barely a breath, doesn't fear death. It dances with it. Behind her, the cruiser trembled as electrical storms lashed the upper atmosphere, and far below, under the rage of the scarlet skies, the lights of the cities pulsed on calm, defiant. Eternal. Asterisk, the first human they saw was laughing in a storm. That would shred steel. Zilar pressed a clawed hand against the viewport of the shuttle as the world's fury raged around them. The atmospheric entry had been a nightmare winds clawing at the hull, lightning screaming through the sky like living serpents. She had counted 3 direct strikes and 2 engine shutdowns before they broke through to the lower cloud layers. Below, the planet stretched out like a battlefield forged by angry gods. Forests of black ironwood bowed under hurricane gusts. Rivers whipped into frothing madness, and in the distance, a city rose like a dare against nature itself towering. Structures of glass and steel stabbing defiantly toward the sky. And there, amid the chaos, stood a figure. The shuttle's stabilizers roared as they hovered above a shattered coastline where waves the height of small mountains smashed against jagged cliffs. In the spray and rain, a lone shape moved with an almost careless grace. Zilara magnified the view. Humanoid. No exosuit, no breathing mask. Just fabric clinging to a lean frame, hair plastered to his skull by rain, and a grin in actual grin splitting his face as lightning ripped open the heavens behind him. What in the abyss is he doing? Zilara hissed, her voice sharp. With disbelief, Commander Dren leaned forward, mandibles twitching in what might have been the insectoid equivalent of awe. He's waving at us. The human raised a hand, fingers spread in an easy gesture, as if greeting old friends in the middle of a festival, not standing on a cliff that could collapse at any moment into a death sea. A new voice crackled through their combs. Smooth, warm, utterly calm. Welcome to Earth, Judge. You're early. Thought the Council would need another century before daring to drop by. Zilara blinked. The transmission was clear, unmarred by static despite the storm. The voice belonged to the man below, the one standing in a gale strong enough to rip apart lesser craft. She glanced at the data feed. No cum implants detected. He was speaking through the wind, and somehow the signal carried. Impossible. She opened the channel. Identify yourself, she demanded. Her tone as sharp as a blade. Dr. Merrick Voss, he replied, utterly unfazed by the tempest screaming. Around him, field biologist. Also your tour guide, apparently. Zilara's claws tightened against the console. You live here? The laugh that followed was soft, but edged with something fierce, something proud. Live here? Judge, we thrive here. The shuttle touched down moments later on a landing pad that swayed like a leaf in the storm. Zilara descended with Dren at her side, every instinct screaming caution. The air slapped her like a hammer, thick, hot, laced with oxygen so rich. It burned her lungs. Gravity dragged at her bones like chains. Every breath felt like defiance. And then she saw the human up close. His skin was marked with faint scars, his eyes bright as polished steel. He wasn't just enduring this place. He looked born of it, carved by its violence into something that didn't break. Something that wouldn't. Your counsel, Merrick said, reading them in a glance. His smile tilted, almost amused. Guess that means you're here to judge us. Go ahead. Just remember what kills others makes us stronger. Lightning arced overhead, close enough to blind. Merrick didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. Zilara, for the first time in centuries of service, felt a chill run through her crest. Because, in that moment, she understood. This wasn't a species that feared death. This was a species that danced with it and laughed in its face, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Asterisk. Every chart screamed impossible, yet the humans treated it like a game. Judge Zilara sat in a climate-controlled chamber atop one of the human towers, a fortress of alloy and glass, built against a sky that wanted to kill everything beneath. Even here, the storm's fury pressed against the walls, making them shudder like prey in the jaws of a beast. She stared at the holodisplays, each line of data gouging at her understanding of life and survival. Gravity, lethal for most carbon-based. Organisms. Oxygen, dense enough to ignite in the right pressure spikes. Biosphere, saturated with predatory megafauna and hyper-evolving pathogens. And yet these creatures humans flourish. She raised her gaze slowly. Across from her, Dr. Merrick Voss lounged as though this were an afternoon tea. and not a meeting on a world classified as the most violent known to the Galactic Concord. His clothing was damp from their storm-soaked arrival, but he wore the chill like a badge, one arm draped over the back of the chair. His smile was the same as before, easy, unreadable, edged with something primal. How? The words slipped from Zilara's throat like a broken prayer. Her voice carried centuries of logic straining under a weight it could not bear. How are you alive here? Merrick's eyes glimmered with amusement. Alive, Judge? We're thriving. Big difference. Her claws tapped the edge of the table as she summoned another feed, a time-lapse of Earth's recorded environmental cycles. Oceans boiling, continents shifting like cards in a gambler's hand. Extinction events, volcanic winters, asteroid strikes. Dozens of cataclysms that would erase entire species in a heartbeat. You've had more extinction-level events than any world on record, she said, her voice tight. Any other species would have perished 100 times over. Any other species? Merrick echoed softly, leaning forward. His tone dropped, weight settling into every word. But not us. He touched the display, dragging a fingertip across the violent epochs of his planet's history. Every time Earth tried to kill us, we adapted. Ice ages? We mastered fire? Plagues? We built medicine? Predators? We became hunters. The planet turned its worst on us, and each time we learned, we evolved. Zilara stared, and for the first time, she understood what terrified her most. This wasn't arrogance. This wasn't a boast. It was truth cold and absolute. The judge glanced at another screen showing human physiology. You heal fast. Endure trauma beyond safety thresholds. And these pain receptors? She hesitated, crest twitching in disbelief. You push. Past them? Merrick chuckled, low and rich, like a predator amused by a smaller beast's confusion. Pain's just a message, Judge. We don't have to listen. She recoiled slightly. That's madness. No, Merrick said, his smile turning into something sharper, something dangerous. That's survival. Behind him, the panoramic window revealed the living nightmare of Earth hurricanes chewing the horizon, lightning crawling like serpents across blood-red clouds. And there, far below, human cities burned with a stubborn, golden glow unbroken, unwavering. Zilara couldn't tear her gaze away. For all her years classifying worlds, all her sterile definitions and legal decrees, she realized something with the force of a blade through her chest. This species was born in hell, and it made them beautiful in a way that terrified her. They call Earth a Deathworld, Merrick said, rising smoothly to his feet. But for us, it's just home. The judge exhaled slowly, but it felt like her lungs couldn't draw enough air. Because now, another thought clawed its way into her mind, one she dared not speak aloud. If this is what humans are on their world, what will they become when they leave it? And beyond the storm, far past the scarlet clouds, the stars waited. Asterisk, base. Called it a hunt. For humans, it was Tuesday. Judge Zilara gripped the harness bar as the ground transport slammed through. A wall of rain thick enough to drown sight itself. Mood geysered up against the armored panels, and the cabin shook with the roar of something vast and alive just beyond the storm veil. Every instinct in her body screamed retreat, but the humans opposite her sat calm, strapping on weapons with the casual rhythm of breathing. Dr. Merrick Voss was among them, sealing the magnetic clamps on a long rifle. His grin was the same as always, relaxed, playful, almost cruel in its confidence. Relax, Judge. You'll want to see this. It's educational. Zilara's crest stiffened against her skull. This is insane. I told you I only require observation of your ecosystems, not participation in your... A roar split the storm. The sound was a living weapon, low and seismic, thrumming through the bones like an execution drumbeat. It wasn't a call. It was a verdict. The human beside Merrick smirked and chambered around the size of Zilara's forearm. "Guess she's awake," he said. The transport skidded to a halt, brakes shrieking. A blast door dropped, slamming open with a crash. Wind punched into the cabin like a predator's strike, carrying with it the scent of wet iron and blood. And then Zilara saw it, the apex. The one they called the Earth Alpha. It was the size of a dropship, armored in plates of bone and hide like living iron. Eyes like molten coins glared through the downpour as it stalked forward on limbs thick as alloy girders. Every step shook the ground. Its breath came in gouts of steam, reeking of old kills. Its maw split into a grin of sabers, each one longer than her arm. Zilara froze. The Deathworld had a face now, and it wore hunger like a crown. The humans? They smiled. Positions. Merrick barked, voice slicing through the storm like steel. The team scattered without hesitation, diving behind shattered trunks, leveling rifles, locking blades into magnetic grips. Not a flicker of fear, not even a tremor. They were laughing. Laughing in the shadow of something that could swallow them. Whole. The Alpha charge the ground fractured under its weight as it came on like an avalanche. Lightning carved the sky in jagged veins, and the rain turned to steam around its hide. Zilara's breath locked as she saw the humans move not with panic, but precision. Explosions flared at its flanks, shrapnel whirring like angry bees. The humans rolled, ducked, sprang up again, every motion in brutal harmony. One vaulted onto the beast's back with a hook line, slamming a thermal charge into the ridge of its spine. Another darted beneath its throat, firing up into the softer flesh where armor plates met. The Alpha bellowed, a sound like mountains breaking, and the humans roared back. A war cry that tore through the storm, raw and savage and alive. Zilara gripped the cabin frame, heart pounding like a war drum. This wasn't combat. It was an art older than peace itself, a duet of blood and will. She watched Merrick vault through the air, landing astride the beast's skull. Lightning split the sky behind him, framing his silhouette like a god out of myth. With one savage wrench, he drove a blade down between those molten eyes. The Alpha collapsed, the earth quaking as its bulk struck the ground. Steam rose in veils. From its carcass, blood pooling like molten copper. Merrick slid down its flank, landing lightly in the mud, and wiped his blade on the beast's hide. He turned to Zilara, rain streaking his face, smile sharp enough to cut. "Now you see," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "We don't just survive here, Judge. We conquer." Behind him, the storm raged on, uncaring. But Zilara wasn't looking at the storm anymore. She was looking at the humans, and for the first time since stepping foot on this world, she understood why the Council feared them. Because they weren't prey. They weren't even predators. They were something worse. Something that chose to fight when logic demanded surrender. Something that looked at hell and called it home. And she realized, with a chill like ice down her spine, if they could tame this planet, what chance would the galaxy have when they set their eyes outward? The council chamber glittered with sterile perfection, a stark contrast to the howling storms Zilara had left behind on Earth. Light spilled in golden beams through crystalline arches, casting rainbows across the polished floor. Every detail, screened, control, predictable, ordered, safe. And yet, as Judge Zilara stepped onto the central platform, carrying the recordings of what she had seen, a hush fell like a curtain. Every delegate in the great amphitheater scaled, feathered, plated, and robed turned toward her with a single question burning in their eyes. "What did you find on the Deathworld?" She looked at them, these titans of law and reason, and for the first time in her long service, Zilara felt small. Not because of them, but because of what she had left behind. She activated the holodisplay. Images burst into the air. Oceans, clawing at mountains under blood-red skies. Lightning storms splitting continents. And humans laughing, running, fighting monsters the size of starhaulers, with nothing but steel, fire, and sheer, brutal will. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Voices rose in disbelief. Impossible. No organism could endure this environment. Those readings must be fabricated. Zilara let them rage. When the noise crested, she spoke, and her voice cracked like a plasma whip. Silence. The word froze the hall. Her crest angled forward, her eyes like cold iron. Counselors, she began, her tone a blade honed on terror. The planet designated E3 by our charts is confirmed as Class 13. It meets every criterion for annihilation. Hyperseismic. Instability. Apex predators in abundance. Biospheric hostility beyond survivable thresholds. Any rational life form would flee. A pause waited, deliberate. Then she delivered the cut, but they do not flee. The Hala shifted, showing Dr. Merrick Voss standing in the storm, lightning crowning his head like a halo of fire. Then the footage of the Alpha Hunt, humans swarming a beast from nightmare, killing it with tactics and audacity that defied sense. They thrive, Zilara said softly. They bend catastrophe to their will. They have endured extinction events that would scour entire star systems clean. They heal where others perish. They fight when others submit. A hiss of unease slithered through the chamber. One delegate rose, plumage trembling. Judge, are you saying these humans are a threat to galactic stability? Zilara's hands curled into fists. She remembered Merrick's grin, the roar of thunder as humans laughed in its teeth. And beneath her fear, something darker stirred, truth sharper than dread. They are not a threat, she said at last. They are an inevitability. Shock rippled like a tidal wave. Voices exploded into chaos arguments clashing like blades. Exterminate them before they spread. Contain them at all costs. They could become allies useful against the outer swarms. Above the din, the speaker's gavel slammed, its chime slicing through the uproar. Order! Judge Zilara, what is your recommendation? She lifted her head slowly, and in her eyes burned the reflection of storms that no council dome could ever hold back. My recommendation? Her voice was ice wrapped in fire. Do not provoke them. Do not corner them. For they have learned. One lesson their world taught them well. When death comes, they do not bow. They rise. The hall fell silent. Every delegate felt the weight of those words settle like a shadow over their empires. And in that silence, Zilara wondered if any of them truly understood. She doubted it. Because she had stood on that planet, she had felt its wrath. She had looked into the eyes of the species that laughed in hell and called it home, and deep within her, a whisper curled like smoke. This galaxy will not survive them. It will belong to them. Asterisk the chamber had emptied hours ago, but Zilara remained alone. Her silhouette etched against the pale light filtering through the crystalline dome. The council's voices still echoed faintly in the chamber wall's fear, disguised as strategy, panic masquerading as diplomacy. Containment, quarantine, neutralization. The words rattled like dry bones. They believed they still had time. That they could control this? They were wrong. Zilara replayed the last recording one more time. The image swelled into the air before her. Merrick was standing on a precipice of black stone, the storm thrashing like a living god behind him. His hair whipped in the wind. His eyes burned with something untamed. Lightning carved a white scar across the crimson sky, crowning him in fire. And then came his words, calm, almost gentle, like the whisper of a blade before it strikes. You think Earth made us strong, he said. You're wrong. We made Earth what it is. Zilara had frozen when he first said it, dismissing it as arrogance. But later, when the data started to make sense, her blood ran cold. Earth had not always been a Class 13 death world. The geological record proved it. Millennia ago, the planet had been less volatile, less cruel. Then came human civilization, earning, mining, ripping open the bones of their world, poisoning skies, breaking oceans, waging wars that cracked continents. They had turned a sanctuary into a slaughterhouse, then adapted to survive the slaughter. They didn't inherit hell. They forged it. Zilara closed her eyes, but the truth carved itself into her mind like molten glass. These were not victims of circumstance. They were architects of adversity, creatures that thrived on chaos, that sharpened themselves on the whetstone of disaster. And now they had ships, engines that pierced the void. They were already reaching beyond their cradle, their voices whispering across the stars like a promise. The Council feared what humans might become if they escaped Earth. Zilara feared something worse. They already had. The holla shifted again, another clip from the hunt, from the storm, from the laugh that still rang in her ears. Merrick, standing among the broken bones of the apex predator, rain coursing down his face like war paint, saying with that maddening calm, "We adapt, always. And when we find something stronger than us, Judge?" A pause, his smile, sharp as razors. "We make it ours." Zilara's claws trembled as she sealed her report, but her last words were not for the Council log. They were for herself. "They call them humans," she whispered to the empty hall. "But that word, it is too small for what they are becoming. Far beyond the Council's glittering spires, in the black gulf of space, human starships cut silently through the void, hard and hungry, like the children of storms they were. Their engines burned not with conquest, but with inevitability. The galaxy still slept, dreaming of order. But in the shadow of those stars, something fierce and unyielding had awakened. And when the storm finally broke across the heavens, every world would learn what Zilara had come to understand in her bones. Hell does not break humans. Humans build homes in hell. And then they build empires. *The end.